Okay, since the previous video didn't have sound, here I am again trying to fix that and to record our session again. So welcome to our fifth session that is about the modeling teacher. And as you can see, the first thing I would like you to do is to watch a trailer. I mean, the trailer is from the movie Bad Teacher by Cameron Diaz. So please watch the film first, and after this, I have some reflection questions for you. Okay? So the reflection questions I have are: first of all, what are the negative aspects that you saw in Cameron Diaz as a teacher? I mean, what are the things that you say, these things I'm not going to do in my professional life because they are not correct, because it's not what you are expected to do. Okay, so try to jot down all those aspects that you are convinced that you are not going to do. The second question is, how do you contrast what she thinks and what the physical education teacher and the old woman believe? Because it's like a contrast that there is between what she thinks and between what the other two people think. I mean, then what turns this bad teacher, who is Cameron Diaz, as I told you, into a good teacher? Because there is a moment in the movie that she becomes a good teacher. Why? What is the reason? Then, her extrinsic motivation really plays an important role in how she behaves. What are the things that make you turn your deficiencies into good teaching traits? So, I mean, here I want you to compare yourself and Cameron Diaz as a teacher. Because even though you are not extreme, I mean, none of us is as extreme as she is. But we all have deficiencies. So how do we do in order to turn those deficiencies into strengths? Because you have to do something, you have to use a skill, you have to seek for information, you have to do something in order to turn those deficiencies into good teaching traits. How can you cope with a long day without being irritated or being in a bad mood? How do you cope with that? What is the role of vocation in your teaching experience and life? And as you may have seen, there is an Edmodo thread where you can definitely post what you think about these questions, and I'm very interested in hearing about you. Then, in the following slide, which is number 4, you have another film which is like the opposite from the previous one, because in the first one, in Bad Teacher, the teacher doesn't have the vocation of being a teacher. But in the second one with Michelle Pfeiffer, and this is an old movie, the one Dangerous Minds, I love this film because this film shows how you establish rapport with your students and how the interests of your students somehow become your interest, and all of a sudden you end up being really motivated. So both movies, if you have the chance of watching them, I mean, as the whole film, please be my guest because I think both of them are great. So in this case, as it says there in the slide, the protagonist, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, is a vocational teacher and wants to build rapport with the students. What are the things she points out about her students? How does she establish rapport? So you have to think of, I mean, she mentions several things about the students, and those things she mentions are really important in order to establish rapport. So I really want you to tell me what she does in order to establish rapport. So in both cases, what comes from watching both movies is that the teacher is a role model. And this is what comes in the next slide, slide number 5. The teacher is a role model. So whatever we do in front of our students, that is going to produce an impact. So the way we act, the way we react, the way we give messages, not only what we speak, but also the way we sit, the way we talk, the tone of voice we use in order to talk, the way we approach our students, the way we walk the classroom. Do we walk around the classroom, or we just stand at the front of the class and we establish like this barrier between us and the teachers? Then, the way the teacher approaches working at school, sometimes we find colleagues, or sometimes we say, I don't like this school because of this, or the principal this, or other colleagues this, or sometimes this happens, and sometimes we don't do it with a purpose. Sometimes we don't do it with the aim of uh, hurting people or doing something wrong, but sometimes these messages get to the students, and this is absolutely important in the sense that students are like a sponge. They absorb everything and they get those messages very clearly. And obviously, the way you provide feedback. I mean, it's not the same a teacher that says, okay, you got a 6, that the person that says, okay, Juan, come here, you got a 6 because you had these, and these things to improve. And you can improve those things by doing this, and this. You always need to say something. You always need to provide the students with an opportunity for growth. So for this reason, I mean, for the things I have mentioned, your attitude, the way you address your students, the way you dress, the way you sit at the desk, the way you walk the classroom, the way you provide students with feedback. Sorry. The way you provide your students with feedback, the way you react toward your students, the way you plan your lessons. I mean, this is also an important message that sometimes sometimes, no, I would say always our students get, is that when you go to a class and you don't plan the lesson, obviously the students realize that you didn't plan the lesson, and the students realize that you are just doing something that comes to your mind at the same moment. Why? Because there is no connection, because they actually see that you haven't planned anything. So when you plan a lesson, you are showing respect for your students. So it is important that they realize that you respect them. If they feel that you respect them, they are going to respect you. Then, um, the way you establish rapport, I mean, everything and all these things are the things that matter. So going to the next slide, which is number 7, that refers to your posture. I mean, there are several things that usually happen when one observes a classroom that I think that should be avoided in terms of the posture, the teaching posture we should have. The first one is sitting on the desk. I mean, well, probably you can tell that this is old-fashioned, but it's true. I mean, you cannot sit on the desk. I mean, this shows hmm, some kind of irrespect in my position, in my point of view. Then dress appropriately. When I say dress appropriately, this doesn't mean that you have to use you have to wear pants, or you have to wear a skirt, no, that doesn't mean that. You have to respect your style. If you like wearing jeans like I do, for example, wear jeans, but try to see if your jeans are in good conditions. If I mean, you don't need to have any distractor that comes from you. Then be approachable. This is so crucial in to establish rapport, to be approachable. Why to be approachable? Because sometimes you are the kind of educator, the kind of teacher that doesn't have any, any time for the students. So try to be approachable and reachable. I mean, if you connect with them through Edmodo, try to answer their messages, try to answer them their messages on Facebook, anywhere. And obviously that if you teach them face to face, I mean, sometimes you may have time during the break, sometimes you may have time in a free period you may have between one class and the other. So all those aspects are integral part of establishing rapport. Okay. The next aspect is using the appropriate tone of voice. I mean, you cannot use the same tone of voice all the time. I remember when I was at high school, I had a teacher, a physics teacher, and he used the same pitch all the time. So he was explaining like this all the time. And then when I misbehaved, because I was one of the students who misbehaved, said, Rodriguez, please silence. So there was no difference in the way he spoke. So when you don't have difference in the way you speak, you really, I mean, it's boring. So you really need to make the difference. Sometimes you need to be sweet, sometimes you need to be firm, sometimes to be bossy, sometimes you need to be, I mean, you have to change. And the students need to be aware that your voice is indicating something else than the message you are saying. Then the body language. And you have some tips there in terms of body language. And you are going to work with this with Alice. So I'm not very worried about what I'm going to say about body language, because Alice is going to work with some exercises from a book that is very useful in terms of how you can actually stand up in front of a class, how your arms, your legs, and the whole body is telling the students several things that you need to consider you are whenever you are teaching. So when you are in a class and when you are standing in front of a class and when you start teaching, one of the questions that we usually have is, what type of English is the best we can use? I mean, what type of English is the one we should use? And my answer is the best English we can. So that means that if I have if I have a certificate, if I am a graduate student, I cannot live only with that. I mean, I need more. I need to keep on studying. I need to read. I need to watch television in English. I need to watch videos in English. I need to watch movies in English. I need to do something else in order to keep on improving. Because one of the aspects is that English is like a muscle. You need to exercise the muscle in order to get stronger. Why? Let's imagine you have a wonderful command of the language, but then you keep on teaching first grade, first grade, first grade, first grade, because you love teaching first grade. What is going to happen in 5 years is that your level of English is going to be much lower. Why? Because the level of English you are using is much lower. So it is really important that you do something in order to keep on improving the way you speak. So you may wonder, but I don't have money. Well, that is not a problem. And be sure of something. Nobody's perfect. So nobody speaks a type of English that is 100% correct. I have made several mistakes in in these 15 minutes of presentation, but I could correct myself because I am monitoring myself, and that's important. When you are aware that you need to keep on improving, that is the best sign that you are growing. So some time ago there was that myth that, and I'm moving into the next slide, which is number 10. There was that myth that what was correct was to speak British English. And people were like this all the time, trying to, I mean, come on. There are, even though we try to use an American accent or a British accent, our accent is Spanish. Our accent is Uruguayan because we have that culture. So since we speak Spanish, there are several things that even with a lot of training, and even though we may believe that some people have a wonderful pronunciation, that's correct, but we cannot avoid the fact that we have an accent, and that accent comes at one moment or another, but people, I mean, native speakers figure out that we are from somewhere else, and we are not Americans or we are not British. Okay? Um, so here, the first one says, I speak British or American English wrong. Since we are Uruguayans, we speak Uruguayan English, and that's fine. But what you need to know is that you need to pronounce in the correct way. You need to know the stress of the words. You need to know how to use intonation in the different types of intonation we have. So, be my guest and relax and try to keep on improving your English by reading, by doing other stuff, but don't get mad at speaking British or American English. Then the other myth is when we say I have my first certificate or my proficiency or my TOEFL, so I don't need to study anymore. That's so wrong because when you have a first certificate, when you have a CPE, when you have a TOEFL, what you have is a certificate. And in general, when we attend those courses, we are trained in order to pass those certificates. Obviously, we learn grammar, we learn different things. We learn vocabulary, we learn how to read, we learn how to write, but for a specific purpose, which is passing the exam. But there are other things that we don't learn. So the only way to learn is by reading, is by watching TV, watching movies, and interacting with colleagues. These are the things that are going to help you improve the way you speak English. The next one is I tend to speak slowly and with a Spanish pronunciation so my students understand. That is also so wrong. I mean, there is something that you are going to see with Alice that is called isochronicity. Isochronicity is a concept that is very important to teach our students. And what does isochronicity say? Well, isochronicity says that there are two types of words in English. One of those type of words are called or is called content words, and the other one is function words. In English, function words are unstressed, and content words are stressed. So, in a in a sentence where the amount of content words is the same, it should take us the same amount of time to say it. And I'm going to give you an example, which is not my example, actually is in one of the phonetics books. If you say, for example, me, you, we, they, the four words have meaning because they carry content. Okay, me, you, we, and they. Let's imagine that you say me, you, we, and they. You included and between the words. But see, me, you, we, they. Me, you, we, they. The same amount of time. Let's imagine that we say in between and then. Me and then you and then we and then they. The same amount of time. Let's go and then it's me and then it's you and then it's we and then it's they. You see? So the amount of time is the same. So we don't need to say me and then it's you and then it's we and then it's they. This shows that we are speaking in English but with a Spanish pronunciation. Why? Because Spanish pronounces every single word, whereas English pronounces only content words in a strong way. Okay, the other myth is that there are varieties of English that are better than others. And I have heard this so many times. Like when you have, for example, African American English, or when you have Asian English, or when you have Latino English, they believe that those types of English are substandard or are less less important than white middle class American English or British English. It's so wrong. I mean, because each accent, what is the accent is showing the culture of the group of people. So if if we consider the Latino accent, what you are realizing is that my accent is showing my culture as a Latino. So is there anything wrong with that? Nothing. So never say that there's a variety of English that is better than the other, because this is wrong. So if we move to the next slide, which is number 11, there are some tips to improve pronunciation, and I would like to focus on some of those, because the first one is to find autonomous ways of uh, of improving, like what I have just said. I mean, watch television, or listening to music, or watch films, or talk with native speakers, or I mean different way, or reading books. I mean, things that you can find easily and with no cost, and you can definitely take advantage of those ways. The other thing relates to the PADs, to the pads. Why? Because the PADs usually have some salas. So it is very important that you attend those salas, because in those salas you are speaking in English with other colleagues. You are receiving a presentation in English usually. So it is another opportunity for you to practice English in a very natural context, because actually everybody is speaking in English, because there are several things that you can share. The other one is uh, whatever seminar, conference you can attend, please do it, especially when they are free. There are several conferences that nowadays are free. So please attend those conferences. Sometimes the topic is not very interesting, but listen to the English of the person, listen to the words the person is saying. Try to improve your listening skills, try to improve your speaking by taking notes of phrases, words, things the person is actually saying. Then, um, take the chance of talking with native speakers whenever you can. We have the ETA program in Uruguay, so I know it's not all over Uruguay, but in some places you have the chance of speaking with native speakers. Then read more about pronunciation. You have a wonderful book, which is Jer Kelly, or you have Brian Mott, or you have Peter Roach. Those three books are about pronunciation and phonology, but I think that those books are very important in the sense that you can know more about how the sounds are produced. Then, and probably the most important, in every book, I mean, in Uruguay in Focus, in Speak Out, in Success, in all the books we are using at the moment, you have pronunciation exercises. So what you are going to do is use those pronunciation exercises. Because what my understanding or my feeling is that those exercises are skipped in general, because we believe that we need to ponder more grammar than other things. That's not true. I mean, pronunciation is an essential and integral part of learning English. So in the next slide, we have something related to stress. And stress is so important to convey meaning, and it's important also to be a good speaker of the language. So there are two different types of stress. You have the word stress, and you have sentence stress. Please read what is there in the slide, because you are going to work with Alice in this. And So you don't need much explanation, I think, about this. The same happens with intonation, which is in the next slide. Intonation is very important because through intonation you are showing different things. For example, if I say, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's a falling intonation. That means that it's a question and it's an ordinary question. Okay? But if I say, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, the stress there is in you. You is a function word in this case. So since it is a function word, what you are doing is it is unstressed. And but I stressed it. Why? Because that is my accentual function of intonation. Why is my accentual function of intonation? Because I want to the other person to realize that I'm not talking about any person doing something. I'm talking about him or her doing something. Okay? So my emphasis is in the person. So that is very important. So intonation is essential in order to know whether you are showing some feelings or others, or whether you are giving an order, etc., etc., etc. And you are going to practice with Alice as well. So I'm not going to go very much into it, but if you have any question, you just need to ask me. And this leads us to something that is common in all the different levels of middle school and high school, that is public speaking. And public speaking is, and it is in the next slide, which is number 12, I think, or 14. I think it's 14. Uh, Public speaking is important because, I mean, it's one of the elements, one of the core elements that Inspección de Inglés put in our syllabus. So in every course, in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the courses, we need to teach some kind of public speaking. So one of the theories behind public speaking is called the onion theory. So that's why you have those onions there. And the picture is very representative because what I want you to see with public speaking is that there are different layers. Okay? There are different layers. So uh, in the case of public speaking, what the onion theory says is that whenever we speak, we need to go from a more general information into a more concrete information. So it's represented with the onion. Why? Because we peel the onion, we peel the onion, we peel the onion, and we are taking all the different layers off. And then we get to the core of the onion. And the core of the onion is probably the most important information. But the other information is also important because it's providing context and it's providing a transition in order to get into the core of the information we are giving in public speaking. Okay? So if we move to the next slide, there are several ways of starting a public speaking activity, and some of those are quite common, like a rhetoric question or a quotation. A quotation is something that another person said. For example, think, I think, therefore I am. That is a very famous phrase. Pienso, luego existo. So that phrase is giving me an idea and is so known that it is a quotation, and it's important because we have all the people on the same page. Then another aspect can be an anecdote or any story that can happen. For example, in today's presentation, what I did, I started this presentation by apologizing and saying that something happened. So I started with a story, and then I started giving you the information for this session. Something unexpected or some body language. Sometimes people start mimicking or doing some type of things with their body. Or then some facts and figures. Sometimes people love numbers. I'm not a number lover, so I would never start a presentation with numbers. But some people say 50% of, did you know that 50% of Uruguayans believe that Peñarol is the best? I mean, I think it's more than 50%, but anyway, uh, the idea is to show numbers. So what happens with these ideas, with these strategies I'm sharing with you? They have to be attractive, they have to be catchy, they have to be appealing for the people. Okay, you cannot start like, no, you have to be lively, you have to be very, I mean, very outgoing. You have to show that you are interested in what you are saying, Yes, I'm right. So in that way, the other people are going to be engaged and interested in what you are saying. So you have to be very creative, you have to be well informed and well rehearsed. And then you need to pay attention to your attitude and to your body language, because maybe you say, oh, today we are going to talk about flowers in Uruguay. Why I'm having the hand like this? Is it necessary? No, because this is giving another message. This is giving the message that maybe I'm not comfortable. This is the message that maybe I don't want to be here and speaking about this topic. So you have to be careful about the messages you are giving to your audience, or the messages you are giving to your students. So after you start with one of these interesting things, you are going to develop the public speaking activity. And how you are going to develop in detail, okay? You need to use a lot of language. You need to use adjectives, you need to use nouns, you need to use information. That's why sometimes when we ask students to, okay, for next class, prepare a public speaking activity. Come on, people. We need to make sure that they know vocabulary, they know the structure, they know several things in order to prepare a public speaking activity. They need to know that they have to start very high, then they have to develop the public speaking activity, and then they have to finish high. So in that way, the activity is effective. So other things is that um, take into consideration the onion theory, provide the audience with images. For example, if I tell you, it was it was late at night, it was cold, it was dark, and it was snowing. With this phrase, you have an image in your mind of where my story is going to take place. Why? Because I used adjectives and I used nouns in order to create the setting. Then try to put the sequence in order. So don't start talking about the beginning and then you go to the end and then you go back to the beginning, and I mean try to follow a logical order. And then two important things. Whenever you can, ask rhetoric questions. Ask questions that they do not have an answer, but they keep the audience thinking. And the other thing, make pauses. Whenever you make pauses, the audience has the chance of reflecting. The audience has the chance of understanding what you have just said. So that's why it is vital that you do this. So as I said before, remember to find a memorable ending. And so you need to end your presentation really high, really high. So another element, which is in my last slide, I think, yes, because then is the task, is that you need to use rubrics. I mean, whenever you use rubrics, it's so democratic because, I mean, the student has there what is going to be assessed. Are you going to assess fluency? Are you going to assess content? Are you going to assess um, grammar? What you are going to assess? You need to know. I mean, if the students know what you are going to assess, they are going to be more creative. If you are going to assess creativity, they are going to try to be creative. If it says uh, aids, like for example a poster or something, the students are going to create a poster, so they want to get those grades also, because this also shows your expectations about the presentation. And you are going to be working with rubrics next year because we have the assessment part next year, but tomorrow with Alice you are going to be doing some stuff, and you are going to be creating some rubrics about public speaking. And guess why? And let's go to the task. After you create the rubrics with Alice, which is the first part of the task, then you are going to record yourself with your computer, with your mobile phone, with your camera, etc. In my case now, I'm recording myself with Windows Live Movie Maker. I just put record the video and it says from my camera, and I just speak and then I save it, and there's no problem. But you can do it with your telephone, you can do it with your camera, I mean, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So the idea is that to make a public speaking activity is a 1 or 2 minute public speaking activity about the topic you choose. Any topic will be fine. The due date is going to be November 30th, and we are going to assess your public speaking activity with the rubrics you create. Okay? Well, that's all for this session, and I would like to say thank you because you have been very supportive of this course, and I hope it's fulfilling your expectations. And next year we are going to continue with the 3 sessions that are still missing. Okay, bye.